Hey everybody, I've got a video here for you today. Now I want to talk about the Sphinx again. I've had a lot of comments or questions relating to chambers and passageways underneath the Sphinx, and I believe there has been a lot of false information put out, and I just wanted to put my 2 cents in regarding this issue. But of course here we are looking overhead at the Sphinx, and we are going to go down and take a little better look at the Sphinx here. Obviously today what we see is not what was present in remote antiquity, and I'm going to show you a few pictures. But here we are down on Street View, and here is the Great Sphinx of Giza, as it is commonly referred to. I believe there are things people are missing about the Sphinx, and the underground chambers are a debated topic, and the so-called Egyptologists who need to protect Egyptian heritage and relate everything in Egypt to Egyptian dynasties and to the Egyptian people are going to do whatever they have to deflect information that might suggest of a previous culture living on the Giza Plateau. But it has been stated that by Zahi Hawass, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit more, that there is nothing beneath the Sphinx. But if anybody is familiar with John Anthony West and Robert Schoch's work, they did imaging which showed what seemed to be an artificial chamber underneath, I believe, the front left paw of the Sphinx. And I know people who are familiar with Edgar Cayce knows that that is where he believes the Hall of Records would be found. And when I first heard the Edgar Cayce story, I thought it was rather ridiculous, kind of a far-fetched story, and then when I looked into it I was completely blown away. So I do not disregard anything he says. But here we have the back of the Sphinx, and this is a very important area. I'm going to show you why here. But Zahi Hawass says that there's nothing underneath the Sphinx, and I just want to do a little bit of reading here. And this is talking about Zahi Hawass, and this is an article written by the late Philip Coppens, and I'll leave this link below. It says, rather intriguingly, he added in his report titled The Story of the Sphinx, perhaps the most important result of the groundwater project, and that is just a project that is taking groundwater out of these ancient sites because it is threatening the integrity of these structures. He says, the result of the groundwater project was that it enabled us to put to rest speculation about mysterious underground tunnels and chambers carved below the Sphinx by ancient civilizations. For years, and this is Zahi Hawass speaking, for years I have debated people like John Anthony West, Robert Bauval, and Graham Hancock who say survivors of a lost civilization 10,000 years ago left secrets buried beneath the Sphinx. These people also claim that erosion of the Sphinx was caused by water, and that this necessarily means that it dates back to long before the Old Kingdom. None of their theories has any basis in fact, but their supporters have insisted that we should drill holes to try and find these hidden chambers. I have always refused to permit such projects in the past because there is no scientific basis for it. Because such drilling was a necessary part of our work to protect the Sphinx from groundwater, however, we did finally drill in the vicinity of the statue, and we found that there was no hidden passages or chambers in there. And they knew of this ground penetrating radar work done by John Anthony West and Robert Schoch, so they pretty much knew where to drill not to hit the chambers. That is very easily explained right here. But I just want to show you a few things here. Robert Temple wrote a book called The Sphinx Mystery, The Sanctuary of Anubis, and he was allowed access to certain areas of the Sphinx, and this was, I believe, the time before Zahi Hawass had total control in Egypt and he became the dictator of these ancient sites. But here you can see a chamber, or opening that leads to a chamber, and here you see Robert Temple literally coming out of the Sphinx ass here, and he has been down in these chambers, and he documents it very well in his book. Also in his book, he talks about on the back of the Sphinx, he says that, and he documents very well stories going back 100, 200 years of people in Egypt that knew of an entryway between the back legs up on the back of the Sphinx that led to a vertical shaft going down to a chamber that had hieroglyphs on the walls and remains of an ancient coffin. And it was obviously looted in remote antiquity. And here you see an overhead view of the Sphinx, and I believe that opening that people documented 300 years ago was right here. He says there's still evidence of it today as being just filled in and blocked over. In 1926, Egyptian officials hired somebody to do restoration on the Sphinx, and this person was not concerned about archaeology or anything like that, and any openings and cracks, including chamber entrances, were completely cemented over. And what we see today of the Sphinx is not what it looked like in remote antiquity. And here you see a picture close up of the Sphinx coming from maybe about 130, 140 years ago. And you notice the neck here. The neck is over twice as large as the lower jaw, and that is just totally ridiculous. The Egyptians were fanatic about getting their proportions exactly right. And what kind of anything has a neck over twice as large as their lower jawbone? And here you see what today the neck is a lot more reasonable here. It comes up and kind of looks like a natural neck, and obviously restoration done in the last 100 years is responsible for this work here. But a long time ago it had a neck of proper proportions to the size of it, and I believe there was a different head on this in remote antiquity, most likely Anubis. And this feature here, the neck here, it almost looks like there is a collar on this thing, and I don't know any pharaohs really that wore collars. And here today that feature is totally gone. And around the 4th or 5th kingdom period, the worship of Anubis was changed over to the worship of Osiris. And what they did in antiquity in Egypt is once the gods were changed, they totally removed or they demolished the old gods and put in the new gods. And that's why I believe Anubis was, the head of Anubis was taken off, and the collar here, I mean, it almost looks like there's a collar on the original form that we no longer see today. These perfectly diagonal striations do not look like natural erosion. This looks like part of the original feature of the monument, and Anubis was always referred to as Anubis on his shrine, and shrine is just another word for monument. I believe this could have been the neck could have been part of the original structure. And Anubis, as you see here, and here is just one of the many depictions of Anubis. They are bowing to Anubis on his shrine, how it is always figured. And here you see in antiquity, Anubis was always wearing a collar. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about passages beneath the Sphinx, chambers that people wrote about 200 years ago that really you don't hear about these stories today, because that might suggest of an earlier time period. And going back to the Sphinx picture here, you see that the body that we don't see today, that was has been kind of paper mache'd over, as you could say, this looks really old, and the body was totally deteriorating when it was uncovered about 100 and so years ago. And here you can see what it actually looked like, how deteriorating it was, and how really truly old it actually looks. And here we are on Google Street View, and this is as far back and up as I can get. And I just wanted to zoom in on an area right there in the middle of the screen. You see that little anomaly. Oops, if I can get back up there again. But you see up here on top, that little area right in your middle of your screen right now. I believe this area right here in the middle is the opening that was described by many witnesses that were documented by Robert Temple, and they all described the same thing, a vertical shaft leading down into a tomb with hieroglyphs and an ancient coffin that were looted in antiquity. I just wanted to show you that. But you are not going to hear about these chambers and shafts from people such as Zahi Hawass, who was influenced by preserving Egyptian national heritage and also money and fame and greed. And you're not going to hear about this from so-called expert Egyptologists such as Mark Lehner, who have their nose embedded so far up the Egyptian Antiquity Council's ass just to gain special privileges in searching in Egypt. You're not going to hear about this from them, who have to kind of toe the company line when it comes to preserving national heritage in Egypt. And I just like to go out with this. It says, if I can get to the right point here, in the end, Hawass does not stand for and sums up the current state of Egyptology. He blames the likes of West, Bouval, and Hancock for making ridiculous statements, but in August 1996, unsurprisingly, while in front of the camera, Hawass was scrambling through a tunnel leading under the Sphinx, stating, "No one really knows what's inside this tunnel. We are going to open it for the first time." This is further evidence that his 2009 statement is completely and utter distortion, if not of the truth, then at least of what he said before. So in 1996, there were tunnels, but in April 1999, Hawass appeared on Fox TV and denied the existence of tunnels going out of the Tomb of Osiris, an underground structure near the Sphinx. In April 2009, he repeated the story as if he needed to do so once per decade, but as mentioned in August 1996, he was actually filmed walking inside a tunnel underneath the Sphinx. And this is important too. It says, as Bouval points out in Secret Chamber, the controversy involving Hawass and the Giza Pyramid dates back many decades. Meanwhile, something unusual happened involving Zahi Hawass. For reasons that are not clear, he started to dig in front of the Sphinx temple, apparently in connection with the Institute of Underground Water of the Egyptian Ministry of Irrigation. A drilling through some 50 feet or 15 meters of debris struck red granite instead of the natural limestone in the area. Red granite is not native to the Giza Plateau. The only source is Aswan, 100 miles to the south down the Nile. The very presence of red granite discovered in 1980 in the vicinity of the Sphinx proves that there is something underneath the Giza Plateau, and if Hawass says anything different, it should be first seen as a case of methinketh he protests too much. So that is a little history of chambers and shafts and whatnot near and around the Sphinx. I know a lot of people have been asking, but there is a documented history. We have pictures of shafts still today, and we have excellent documentation and sonar imaging of shafts. And even though Dr. Zahi Hawass, some of his most important finds have been the result of sonar imaging, he states that it is unnecessary, unscientific, and worthless. He is a total joke. Hope you thought this was interesting. You have a nice day.